Welcome to Deep Story. Darwin, right? This guy leaves one of the biggest mysteries in the history of science. What did he do for over 20 years? I mean, he finishes his round, the world voyage, in 1836, comes back to London, and doesn't publish on the origin of species until 1859. 23 years. What was he doing? Waiting for broadband to be invented. Now, people have theories. One popular one is the man was just sick, like really, really sick. His time on the HMS Beagle, 5 years at sea, completely wrecked him. Think about it, 5 years stuck on a boat, rolling waves, bad food, and no Wi Fi. The previous captain of that ship couldn't handle the isolation, shot himself. True story. And Darwin wasn't even on the Beagle as a scientist. Nope, he was the captain's conversation buddy. That's it. Imagine your only job being talk to this guy so he doesn't lose it. But those 5 years, brutal. By the time Darwin got back to London, it was like he collected the world's most complete set of diseases. Headaches, stomach aches, nausea. You name it, he had it. He was basically one bad symptom away from being a WebMD search result. At one point, the man was so sick he could only work 1 or 2 hours a day before collapsing. He was even too afraid to attend social events. He wrote in his diary something like, "I'm scared I'll die halfway there." That's a level of introvert we can all kind of respect. But here's the weird part. For someone who's supposedly too sick to work, he still did a ton of stuff. He moved to the countryside, raised pigeons, grew orchids, and became the world's foremost expert on barnacles. Yeah, barnacles. He even wrote a 4-volume epic about them. 4 volumes on barnacles. The man had priorities, just apparently not writing on the origin of species. Now, some folks think Darwin was just over prepping, like a grad student with too many drafts. He kept experimenting, tweaking his ideas, because he thought his theory wasn't ready. And, to be fair, he did have a big problem, a flashy problem, a peacock problem. Darwin once wrote, "The sight of a peacock's tail makes me sick, literally nauseous." Why? Because it totally messed up his natural selection theory. Survival of the fittest. But that tail, oh, it's not fit. It's a fitness disaster. It wastes its energy, makes it harder to fly, and is basically a neon sign for predators saying, "Dinner is served." So why would evolution create something so, well, ridiculous? The answer came years later in his second book, The Descent of Man. Darwin realized there's more to survival than just dodging predators and finding food. Enter sexual selection. Basically, it doesn't matter if you can outrun a tiger or find all the snacks if the ladies think you're ugly. Somewhere along the line, there was probably a short-tailed peacock just thriving, fast, agile, living his best life. But in the lady peacock's eyes, total loser. No dates, no babies, extinction. Turns out evolution isn't just about the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it's about what makes you look good enough to swipe right. So, here's the big question. Why did Darwin sit on the origin of species for over 20 years? I mean, we know he eventually wrote it, but then why did he suddenly rush to publish it? What was going on in those 20 years? Was he just binging Downton Abbey before it even existed? The truth is, I didn't get it either. But the deeper I dove into Darwin's theory of evolution, the more I started to understand his struggle. And let me tell you, the man wasn't just working on science, he was wrestling with the meaning of existence. His theory wasn't just groundbreaking, it was soul crushing. You see, most of us think the controversy of Darwin's theory is that he said humans weren't created by God, but evolved from monkeys. Shocking, right? But no, that wasn't even his idea. People had been saying stuff like that for ages. Darwin's own grandpa, yeah, Grandpa Darwin, was already talking about evolution, about how species change and how they aren't divinely created. Even Lamarck, the giraffe stretches its neck guy had theories like this. So, what was Darwin's big idea? Darwin's real contribution was this: evolution has no direction, none, zilch, zip. Species don't control their destiny. That's the real bombshell. He wasn't just saying, hey, we came from monkeys. He was saying, guess what? Nature doesn't care about you. In Darwin's view, nature is like this code: emotionless Grim Reaper with scissors, snipping away at anything that doesn't make the cut. You look outside, and it's all birds chirping and fish swimming like this peaceful, happy planet. But zoom out a few million years, and it's just a massacre. Dinosaurs, snipped, trilobates, snipped. Nature doesn't smile, it doesn't cry. It's just there holding the scissors, waiting for the next species to mess up. Every species gets chewed up, turned to dust, then recycled into something new. It's like an endless, brutal game of, so you think you can survive. But here's the kicker: no species controls its fate. No amount of hard work or positivity is gonna make you immune to those scissors. And that's the real kicker. Darwin wasn't just saying, God didn't make you. He was saying, you're not in control of anything. None of us are. Nature's running the show. That's why Darwin was so torn up. He wasn't just killing God, he was killing hope. People like to think we're marching toward a brighter, better future, improving ourselves, mastering our destiny. But Darwin, he's sitting there, sipping tea, writing in his beautifully sarcastic British prose, oh, you sweet summer children, you think you're in charge. Cute? And here's the crazy part: at the same time Darwin's sitting there, paralyzed, there's another guy with a big beard in London, just 16 miles away. You know who I'm talking about: Karl Marx. Yeah, Marx was also shaking things up. But oh, Marx had the confidence of a guy who just nailed Karok Knight. He's like, I'm changing the world. Humanity has a destiny. Follow me to the promised land. Meanwhile, Darwin's over here like, yeah, you keep thinking that. I'll just sit here, trying not to destroy everyone's will to live. That's why Darwin couldn't write for so long. He wasn't just writing a science book, he was unleashing the cold, hard truth of existence. And let's be real, that's not the kind of thing you can just jot down between cups of tea. And here's the thing about Darwin: even after publishing his theory of evolution, the attacks on him didn't stop. They're still coming. To this day, there are people, scientists even, who say, Darwin, nah, he got it wrong. And back in his time, oh, it was a feeding frenzy. Even his best friends, like some of the top scientists in Britain, were like, yeah, Charles, not sure about this whole evolution thing. Because back then, evolution wasn't even science, it was just a hypothesis. And to be fair, it still technically is a hypothesis. Let that sink in. But Darwin's ideas freaked people out, especially the folks close to him. His wife. Oh, she was terrified. Before they got married, she wrote him this heart wrenching letter. She's like, I love you so much, but your theory, it's basically telling God to take a hike. So if we get married, and we're happy in this life. Are we even gonna see each other in heaven? Darwin kept that letter. Years later, he wrote in his diary that sometimes, late at night, he'd hold that letter, press it to his face, and just cry. This man was out here questioning if he and his wife would be ghosting each other in the afterlife. Heavy stuff. He lived to be 73, and on his deathbed, he was like, just give me a simple coffin, nothing fancy. But no, Britain wasn't having it. They're like, nah, Charles, you're going to Westminster Abbey, next to Newton. And boom, they put him in this ridiculously fancy coffin, totally ignoring his wishes. The kicker, right next to him, they buried Kelvin, a physicist who spent his whole life hating on Darwin's ideas. Imagine spending eternity lying next to your biggest critic. That's some poetic British awkwardness right there. And honestly, Darwin's grave is kind of symbolic. Here's a guy who made this massive contribution to science, but he's stuck in this coffin that goes against everything he asked for. He's surrounded by one of the greatest scientists of all time and a dude who thought he was full of it. Forever. That's legacy for you. Now, let's talk about the other Darwin mystery. He dragged his feet for over 20 years, right? But then, between 1858 and 1859, he just banged out on the origin of species like he was cramming for finals. Why? Well, buckle up for some scientific drama. In 1858, this younger scientist, Alfred Russel Wallace, pops onto the scene. Wallace is this scrappy underdog, super passionate about science, but dirt poor. He's out there in the Amazon collecting thousands of specimens, trying to make a name for himself. And just when he's about to ship everything back to England, his boat catches fire. All of it gone. But does he give up? No. He heads to Southeast Asia and starts over, collecting more data in the jungles of the Malay archipelago. Then, one day in 1858, Wallace gets malaria. He's lying there, sweating buckets, probably hallucinating, and bam, he has this epiphany about evolution. So, what does he do? He writes it all down in 3 days. 3 days? And then he's like, huh? Who should I send this to? Oh, I don't know. Maybe Charles freaking Darwin. Meanwhile, Darwin's at home, still sick, still growing orchids, and still staring at his empty manuscript. Then this letter from Wallace shows up. Darwin reads it and nearly has a heart attack. Wallace's paper. It's basically on the origin of species, like almost word for word, down to the vocabulary. Darwin's 20-year magnum opus, written out by some guy with malaria in 3 days. So now Darwin's in a crisis. He's got two choices. Option 1. Publish Wallace's paper like a good, honorable English gentleman. But then evolution gets credited to Wallace, and Darwin's 20 years of slow burn anxiety. Totally wasted. That's a tough pill to swallow. Option 2, snatch the spotlight, publish first, and deal with the shame of screwing over a younger scientist. But Darwin's a gentleman, right? He can't do that. So, what does he do? He panics, writes letters to his friends like, what do I do? Help. And his friends, being very British about it, come up with a compromise. They're like, all right, Charles, here's the plan. Write a summary of your ideas, something quick, and we'll publish it alongside Wallace's paper. That way, you both get credit. Everyone wins. Tea and biscuits all around. Darwin's like, okay, let's do it, Bar. He writes to Wallace explaining the plan, and Wallace. Oh, Wallace is thrilled. He's like, I'd be honored to share credit with you, sir. This is amazing. And just like that, The modern theory of evolution was born out of a malaria fever dream and some good old fashioned Victorian diplomacy. So, here's the thing, even though Darwin and Wallace's papers were published together in some science journal, it was basically an insider deal in the scientific community, no big splash. But Darwin felt the heat. He was like, okay, this is serious. Time to stop messing around with pigeons and orchids. And he went into beast mode. In just 1 year, he cranked out on the origin of species, and when it dropped in December 1859, it was like the Harry Potter of science books. First edition sold out instantly, 6 reprints in just a few years. Darwin was the Beyonce of biology. Now Wallace. Wallace was totally chill about the whole thing. He was like, wow, I can't believe I came up with the same idea as Darwin. What an honor. He even wrote a book later called Darwinism. Imagine naming your book after someone else's theory, just to say, I'm Team Darwin forever. That's some British level humility right there. Compare that to Newton and Leibniz fighting over calculus. Those two went at it like it was the Super Bowl of math. It wasn't just personal, it turned into a full on England vs. France thing, complete with nationalistic drama. Meanwhile, Darwin and Wallace were like, after you, sir. No, no, after you, sir. The classic British politeness. But here's the real reason Darwin's theory got so big, the people around him. He had this incredible group of scientists who weren't just talented but also supportive. These guys could argue fiercely, but they did it with class. Well, mostly, take the 1860 debate at Oxford. This was supposed to be the showdown over evolution. On one side, Darwin's supporters, on the other, his critics. But instead of a fiery clash, it was surprisingly civil. Well, except for one guy, Captain Fitzroy. Remember him? The captain of the HMS Beagle, the guy who brought Darwin along for the ride. Fitzroy shows up, Bible in hand, waving it around like it's the mic drop of all mic drops. He's yelling, This book, this book. It was a whole scene. But after that, nothing much happened. Poor Fitzroy felt so guilty about the whole thing that he later shot himself. Yeah, dark twist. And Darwin, he stayed above it all. He didn't argue, he didn't fight. He just let his ideas do the talking. Meanwhile, his buddy Huxley, Darwin's self proclaimed bulldog, was out there doing all the dirty work. Huxley loved a good debate. His favorite move was listening quietly, waiting for someone to say something dumb, then pouncing. Right before tearing into them, he'd smile and say, Ha, God has delivered you into my hands, and then boom, verbal smackdown. Now, not everyone was a fan. The most vocal critic was this zoologist named Owen. Owen hated Darwin so much that when he became the director of the British Museum, he stuck a giant statue of himself in the main hall. Darwin and Huxley, he shoved their statues into the cafe. That's British revenge for you. Subtle, but spicy. So, what's the takeaway here? Innovation isn't just about being brave. You need the right environment, too. If you don't have a community that supports creativity and debate, how are you supposed to come up with anything groundbreaking? Oh, and let's clear up one big misunderstanding about Darwin. People love throwing around the word evolution, like it's all him. But here's the thing, Darwin barely used the word. It shows up once in On the Origin of Species at the very end. That's it. And that one little mention, yeah, it caused all kinds of trouble. Fast forward, and here come the social Darwinists twisting his theory into Survival of the fittest, baby. Weak people should just disappear. Guys like Spencer and later Hitler, yep, that guy, latched onto this idea of evolution as progress, as some kind of purification of humanity. It's like they completely missed the memo that Darwin wasn't talking about moral superiority or destiny. He was just saying, hey, nature's messy and doesn't care about your plans. Uh, so here's the deal: evolution. It's not about progress. It's not about climbing some magical ladder to perfection. Darwin himself wrote, from all the evidence we've got, there's no such thing as a trend toward progress in evolution. None. Zero. Zilch. And you know who backed this up years later? A guy named Stephen Jay Gould. Gould said, if you really look at life on Earth, bacteria are way better at adapting than humans or any of our fancy mammal cousins. Or think about it. Bacteria are hardcore. They can survive hundreds of meters underground, hanging out in basalt rock, chilling with no oxygen, thriving off geothermal heat. And they reproduce so fast, they make rabbits look like they're on a break. If survival is the game, bacteria are the Michael Jordan of life forms. And humans, we can't even make it through a day without bacteria. Fun fact: about 10% of your body weight is bacteria and microorganisms. Without them, we're toast. So, are we really higher beings compared to bacteria? According to Darwin, not a chance. In fact, the whole idea of progress in evolution, yeah, that's a myth. Darwin wasn't preaching progress, he was saying life just happens. So why do we have humans, these so-called complex beings? Good called it the drunkard's walk theory. Here's how it works. Imagine a drunk guy trying to walk home. He's wobbling all over the place. On one side of the road is a wall. On the other side, a ditch. Where's he gonna end up? The ditch, obviously. The wall bounces him back, but the ditch, that's game over. Species are like that drunk guy. Evolution has no direction, no goal. Simple organisms like bacteria hit a wall. They can't get any simpler. Meanwhile, the random stumble toward complexity. That's just the ditch we fall into. And the numbers back this up. Humans, mammals, all the fancy stuff. A tiny fraction of life on Earth. There are only about 4,000 species of mammals, microorganisms, over 1 million named species. And that's just the ones we know about. There are probably countless more we haven't even discovered. Most life on Earth is simple. The so called advanced stuff, it's rare. We're basically the weird lottery winners of biology. So, if you buy into this drunkard theory, here's the depressing takeaway: human progress isn't some inevitable march forward, it's a fluke. We're the ultimate cosmic accident. And if you think about it, that makes our whole idea of progress kind of sketchy, right? Now, let's talk about the future. Sure, humans are innovating like crazy, but waiting for us up ahead, a few things called technological singularities. And these singularities, they could go either way. Best case, immortality; worst case, absolute disaster. Like, imagine this: one person with the power to destroy the entire planet. Right now, we've got, certain leaders with nukes, but even they can't end the world with one push of a button yet. But fast forward a bit: antimatter weapons. Theoretically, just 30 tons of the stuff delivered on a truck could wipe out Earth. One person could hold the world hostage. Congratulations, we've invented the ultimate supervillain. And if that happens, democracy, freedom, prosperity, yeah, those are toast. Instead, We might be looking at a future ruled by the darkest dictator ever. A civilization might not be heading towards some bright utopia. It might be heading into a black hole. So, yeah, maybe don't celebrate Darwin like he's a cheerleader for progress. Darwin's message wasn't rah humanity. It was more like, hey, guess what? There's no progress. None. Stop kidding yourselves. Good even said, Darwin's theory, after more than 100 years, still has a lesson: we need to kill our arrogance. Humanity is just a tiny twig on a giant tree of life, and we could be snapped off at any time. If we can't let go of this delusion of progress, we're not ready to fully understand Darwin's message. But if progress feels like a pipe dream, how do we keep striving for it? The answer's simpler: we do it ourselves. Nature isn't gonna help us. The laws of the universe. Nope. Even Marx's whole things that don't care about your subjective will idea not gonna save us either. If humanity wants to progress, we've got one shot: our own effort. That's it. Thus or nothing.